Hi, I'm Megan, an educational facilitator. This is the first in a series of videos where we're looking at the ideas from the educational project, Education for Humanity. Today, I'll be speaking to its founder and co-author of the book of the same name. Welcome, Simenon.
Hi.
Simenon, can I begin by asking you, how did you become interested in the idea of education for humanity?
So it came from many decades of experience in the classroom, teaching secondary school students, sixth form, tertiary college, adult education tutorials, and so on. And I became interested not only in the subject I was teaching, but also how students were learning, and then what were they really learning? What were the priorities in education? What should we be teaching? What should be the message of an educational experience for a student?
Thanks, Simenon. They're not questions I feel like I've heard very often. What do you think education is for, Simenon?
Well, I say this somewhat in contrast to what happens in most schools and colleges, where there's usually a beautiful vision statement, but in practice, what most schools and colleges focus on is getting students through exams and maintaining order. That's essentially what education does. And really, my view is quite different, that the function of education, the purpose of education, is to awaken a sense of humanity in students. Humanity, both in a sense of belonging to the 7-8 billion people on this planet. In other words, having a sense of identity that goes beyond the classroom or the community or even the country. But humanity also in the sense of kindness, compassion, human decency. Now, why is this so important? Because if all you do is educate people so that they are skilled, so that they develop their intelligence to the highest possible level, without that sense of humanity, then they can use their knowledge, their ability, to any purpose, good or bad. And we need to remember that most of the atrocities that have been committed over the years are committed by educated, intelligent people. So it's not enough simply to see education as an intellectual process. It needs to be something that's moral, something of the heart, something of our intuitive sense of belonging. So for me, educating for humanity, a sense of shared humanity, needs to be at the absolute heart of all education.
Thank you, Simenon. And thinking about my time in the classroom, even on a day-to-day practical basis, how having kindness and compassion and that sense of community with one another, it really does change the environment of the classroom. It changes the way students learn with one another. It really changes the whole structure. And I think even just a tiny bit of compassion and kindness in the classroom, it really does make a difference to the way students learn. So thank you, Simenon. A key issue you raise in your book is about winners and losers. Why is this so important for your vision of an education for humanity?
Well, as it says in the quote on the screen, the issue of winners and losers kind of skewers education. So if the preoccupation of education is not what am I learning or how can I learn, but how can I be better than somebody else, and the sense that I must get to the top and a fear of failure, of falling to the bottom, it introduces a huge amount of stress into the learning process. And in fact, you stop learning at all. progress, educational progress, and genuine learning is in relation to your starting point, not in relation to somebody else. Okay, so if you see the world, see school is, am I better than this person, worse than that person? It's an endless competition, endless struggle. Well, in fact, the only person you should be competing against is yourself. How can I do better? How can I develop my own potential? So to give you a concrete example, let us imagine a student gets grade B for a particular piece of work. Now, it could be, that's brilliant if a student has been really struggling with that subject and they've had much lower grades previously, that's real progress. But conversely, if a student is very gifted in that subject, maybe finds it quite easy, that could be a bit of a disappointment because they could have done better. So it's never absolute, and it's certainly not in relation to anybody else. So it's, what's your starting point? Have I made progress on what I'm doing? And if people are preoccupied with better than, worse than, actually they don't learn very much. So part of learning is things that seem to fail, making mistakes, reaching dead ends. I remember an interview with a Nobel Prize-winning scientist. Somebody asked him, how did you get to this amazing breakthrough that had earned him the Nobel Prize? And his answer was 30,000 failed experiments. If he hadn't been willing to do that, he would never have got there. And if you are sort of constricted by the ideas, I must get it right all the time, you never, learning in the sense of exploring and experimenting and trying out things and seeing if they work, don't we? That just goes out the window. So it doesn't really help people to be preoccupied with ideas of winning and losing, better than, worse than. Not to say there's anything wrong with competition. Some people thrive on it, particularly in the field of sports, but it's that you don't attach your own personal self-worth to whether you do better or worse in any particular field. And I think that's really important, is to learn to value every student, whatever their level of attainment, and to see their progress in relation to their starting point.
Thanks, Simenon. That's that really strikes home with your comment about the self-worth. So I work with people with autism or learning disabilities, and at the classroom we have tea break, and during tea break, typically I would probably make the tea, but one of the guys I'm working with, he wants to work in the hospitality industry. So I said, oh, why don't you have a go at making the cups of tea for everybody at break time? And the first one he made, it wasn't the best cup of tea that we had ever had, but that was his starting point. And for other people in the group, making a cup of tea is second nature to them. But for him, it's something he wanted to develop, and it's a practical skill for him. And he made this cup of tea, and I said, okay, look, here's some pointers for it. It was as you said about mistakes. Yeah, it wasn't the most wonderful cup of tea, but it was a cup of tea. And the next week, we tried again, gave him a little bit of support, and there was an improvement. And week by week have gone past, and each time he requires less support. He's becoming more independent. The tea's getting better. So his starting point was completely different to somebody else's starting point in the group who could happily make a cup of tea. Whereas for him, it's so valuable and important, and the progress he's made, you can see the progress he's made, and it means something to him. It's a really valuable skill for him. So I think it's brilliant what you're saying, how, you know, it's so important for people's self-worth and to be important for them and valuable to them and their own achievements, and not worth comparing them against other people's achievements.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what other ideas and issues would you say underpin education based on shared humanity?
Well, one of them is about being human, which we've touched on before, and it's about allowing ourselves to make mistakes. I had a kind of spiel I used to tell students when they first arrived, you know, some of us are teachers, some of us are counsellors, some of us are students, some of us are cleaners, secretaries, whatever it is. We've all got different responsibilities, but we are all human. And, you know, I'm going to have good days, bad days. Sometimes I'm going to forget to say something, do something, or say the wrong thing, or put my foot in it, or what have you. And when I do that, I'll try and say sorry and make amends. And I just ask you to do the same thing. So very important to have permission to be human. And that then sets up a very different atmosphere from one that's based on hierarchy and enforced control. It's one which allows people to make mistakes, allows people to take responsibility, allows people to make amends. And my experience of it is it was a very good way of helping students resolve their own mistakes without feeling they have to defend everything they do, which incidentally is true of some students and some teachers too. So to create an atmosphere in which you can be human, I think is really important, and it helps the general order, peaceful resolution of problems, and so on. So I would say being human is a really important, I would also say skill. It's something important that we allow ourselves to be, teachers and students.
Absolutely. I can think of an example only today when I needed to apologise to two students. I had made a commitment with them and then later realised I actually couldn't meet that commitment due to conflict in my diary. So I spoke to them and I apologised and I said, look, I'm sorry I did this, I wasn't thinking straight, and I'm going to rearrange it, and I really apologise to you. And I think it's so important to have that open conversation and, yeah, admit to human error. We're all human. We all make these mistakes, but being able to be upfront and honest and apologise for it's really important. Thank you, Simenon. What kind of skills and values would you like to see students come out of the educational process with?
Well, I hope that they have a sense of shared humanity. As it says in the quote, it's the knowledge and awareness that we all have the same basic needs, whether it's food, warmth, security, and actually beyond that, to love and be loved. And a sense of something special, something sacred, something wonderful in our lives, whatever name we give it. That sense of common bonds, and that we are all on the path of evolution. We are all learning, we are all growing, we are all making mistakes. And I think that above everything, really, there was one of those TV headmasters who put it very well when he said, if we don't produce decent human beings, we have failed. And I would say that should be the number one priority in education: decent human beings.
Thank you for insight into your vision, Simenon. In the next video, I'll be looking at an example of putting these ideas into practice. Meanwhile, if you're interested in finding out more about the book and the project, you can go to our website, educationforhumanity.co.uk.